In the JonBenét Ramsey case, very few people have been watched as intensely and understood as poorly as Burke Ramsey. For decades, strangers have tried to decode a child's face, a child's interview, a child's smile, a child's silence, and a child's adult distance from the center of a tragedy he did not create. But here is the hard truth. A reaction is not a confession. A quiet personality is not evidence. An awkward interview is not a forensic conclusion. The case remains open. No person is identified in this episode as responsible for JonBenét's death. Today, we are looking at Burke through an Enneagram question that applies to a lot of people who grew up under pressure. What happens when the world decides your private coping style must mean something darker than it does? The Enneagram is about motivation, not facial expressions. You cannot watch one clip of someone smiling, pausing, fidgeting, or looking uncomfortable and responsibly announce, "That tells me their type, and therefore what happened." That is not psychology. That is projection wearing psychological language. For Burke, we do not have the access needed to declare an Enneagram type. We do not know his private fears, his internal survival rule, his childhood attachments, or the full emotional meaning of his behavior. What we can do is look at three coping patterns that people often confuse with guilt. Type 5 like withdrawal. Type 9 like shutdown or conflict avoidance. Type 6 like hypervigilance and self-protection. These are not labels for Burke. They are a map for understanding why different people can look unusual, distant, or emotionally mismatched under pressure. The Type 5, often called the investigator or observer, has a core survival rule. I stay safe by creating distance. At its healthiest, this can look like thoughtful observation, privacy, independence, and careful analysis. Under stress, it can look like emotional withdrawal, limited expression, guardedness, or appearing detached when the room expects visible emotion. Now think about how dangerous it is when the public looks at a child through that lens without context. A child who withdraws may be overwhelmed. A child who smiles may be nervous. A child who answers matter-of-factly may be trying to make sense of something impossible. A child who seems disconnected may be protecting themselves from feelings they cannot organize yet. A Type 5-like defense is not proof of coldness. It is often a form of emotional containment. That is true in everyday life, too. Some people process out loud, some people cry immediately, some people go quiet, intellectualize, distract themselves, or pull away. The public tends to trust the reaction it recognizes. But grief and trauma do not follow one script. A secondary pattern people often misunderstand is Type 9 energy. The Type 9, often called the peacemaker, wants internal and external peace. Under pressure, this can become shutting down, minimizing, spacing out, or avoiding the emotional fire in the room. The survival rule sounds like, if I make myself smaller, maybe the conflict will not consume me. Imagine being a child in a family under national scrutiny. Cameras, police, lawyers, commentators, strangers, and adults asking questions that have no safe answer. A Type 9-like coping pattern could make someone appear calm when they are actually overloaded. It could make someone appear unaffected when they are actually trying not to be swallowed by the emotional intensity around them. Again, we are not saying this is Burke's type. We are showing why public viewers should be slow to assign meaning to an outward reaction. Then there is Type 6 energy, the loyalist. At its core, Type 6 asks, who is safe? What is the threat? What happens if I trust the wrong person? Under extreme stress, this can look like watching adults carefully, giving limited answers, defending one's private world, or becoming anxious around authority. This is especially important because true crime audiences often treat guardedness as a clue. But guardedness can also be the completely rational response of a person whose family tragedy has been turned into a national spectacle. The difference between investigation and internet theater is this. An investigator looks for corroborated evidence. Internet theater tries to make a personality style carry the weight of proof. It cannot. Burke's early environment was not just a family home. It became an adult crisis system. Adults controlled the information. Adults conducted interviews. Adults shaped legal strategy. Adults appeared on television. Adults fought over theories. Adults argued about what the evidence meant. And a child was inside that system. The dark psychology here is not a diagnosis of any family member. It is the way a high-pressure system can turn every child behavior into a symbol. One child may become the golden child. Another may become the mystery. Another may become the one nobody knows what to do with. Once the public assigns that role, everything the person does gets interpreted through it. That is called confirmation bias. Once people choose a theory, they often notice only the details that seem to support it. In family systems, children do not choose all their roles. One becomes the caretaker. One becomes the achiever. One becomes the rebel. One becomes the child adults protect. One becomes the child adults do not understand. After tragedy, those roles can harden. The public may see the grieving parent, the beautiful lost child, the quiet sibling, the powerful father. But those are roles, not full people. The more a person is treated as a symbol, the less room they have to be ordinary, contradictory, awkward, private, grieving, or human. Burke's public arc is not a murder mystery clue. It is the story of someone who was a child when a family tragedy became a global spectacle, and who then spent much of his life being interpreted by people who did not know him. That is why this Enneagram episode has to be different. It cannot ask, what type is he, and what does it prove? It has to ask, how does a person protect their identity when strangers make their behavior part of a theory? Type 5, withdrawal. Type 9, shutdown. Type 6, safety scanning. Any of these patterns can be misread by people who are looking for danger instead of complexity. Have you ever been misunderstood because you did not react the way other people expected? Maybe you went quiet when people expected tears. Maybe you laughed when you were nervous. Maybe you became analytical when the room wanted emotion. Maybe you needed space and other people called you cold. Your outward expression is not always a map of your inner world. That is true for you, and it is true for people caught in public tragedies. Before we turn someone's personality into a verdict, we have to ask whether we are seeing evidence, or simply seeing our own need for a story.